We can say that the AfD definitely feeds from a widespread level of discontent in Eastern Germany. So where does that discontent originate from? There's very convincing evidence that the economic turmoil and the economic restructuring, sort of like the disclosing of what has been the GDR economy towards a more global market, towards an integrated market with Germany and Europe, that this really happened in a very dramatic and fast-paced way, which didn't necessarily pay attention to people's work biographies, people's ways of life, what people may have actually wanted to see. And we know from deindustrialization research, for example, in the American Midwest, that there is a certain half-life of these types of experiences. So when people experienced economic deprivation, let's say 20 or 30 years ago, this might actually translate into the generations that follow up. And when we can see the AfD campaigning and using tactics against, for example, migrants coming into the area, we can then for sure sort of like triangulate why, for example, maybe people in Eastern Germany lash out against people inbound, because then again there is a certain, let's say, fear or anxiety that something is being taken away from them, because there's been some sort of similar experiences. When exactly that experience or where exactly that experience is coming from is still a matter of research, but at least when it comes to the economic restructuring of the 90s and early 2000s, we can definitely see that there's room for this type of experience. So again, specifically speaking to the strategies and tactics, I think what the AfD is sowing is a very strategic acceleration of the discontent which has been brewing all over those decades. So when I attended many of the so-called Mondays demonstrations in smaller, mid-sized towns all over Eastern Germany, I mean, the continuing topic was, we don't want to get into a war with Russia. We want lower energy prices. We are worrying about serving the credit of the home we just bought. We are also worried about the state of, for example, educational infrastructure. Do we have enough teachers? Are our schools well equipped enough to actually arise to the challenges which we are facing regarding digitalization? So we have very structural issues people are mentioning. And then we have this whole set of political campaigns which are talking a lot about, again, migration. Saxony has this delicate story, the Pegida movement from 8 or 9 years ago, which really installed a continuing movement, a social movement almost, which again, every Monday brings to the table a very pro-Russia, a very anti- or Islamophobic, anti-West type of narrative. And that just continues to be there without actually necessarily receiving any type of update when we think about voter issues. I mean, state politics don't necessarily decide on a European asylum policy. Like, there is this disconnect. And again, when we think about what parties like the AfD is doing, they are sowing discontent, they're boiling up the discontent. That is one of the core tactics. And they are using these types of social movements to, again, throw all sorts of alleged voter issues at them. But if you look into what people are actually saying on the ground, at least in my research experience, it's very bread and butter issues. And they get, in a sense, hijacked by, oh, also we don't want more Syrians coming into the country. I think the state elections are going to be a first real good indicator on where we stand nationally regarding all these, what Chancellor Scholz calls the Zeitenwende. in a sense, how did the foreign policy of recent years translate into voting behavior? How does Russia's war in Ukraine and the German or European response to this is picked up by voters? We're gonna see a lot sort of like of indicators regarding how does addressing climate change, climate policy works with or doesn't work with people. So what's intricate about this set of state elections we're seeing in Eastern Germany, 5 years ago we had a similar situation. All these three states, Thuringia, Saxony and Brandenburg, went to the booth. They elected the European Parliament, then they elected their state elections, and a year after we had the federal elections. So what's happening is usually the populist movements are gaining a lot of ground during the European elections, then it subsides because everyone is panicking that all the people are voting so anti-system. So we have the state elections, and then the year after we get sort of like a mixed picture at the federal elections. So again, the state elections give us a pretty good idea of trends and trend lines. Of course, Eastern Germany votes differently than federal Germany, but still, for many of the parties, it's a good testing ground to sort of like see, did our policies of the past years work out, and what is sort of like regionally happening, and how can we pick up discourses that are more regionally specific.